Who will be the next king of England? It will be Prince William, Prince of Wales, the eldest son of King Charles. When Charles became king in 2022, following the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, no one was surprised. We had known for years it would be Charles. The only unknown was when it would be. In most monarchies, there is a natural succession of kings. The book of Judges closes with the statement, "In those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes." If a nation hasn't had a king, how did they get the first one? In the case of Israel, the Bible tells how God was involved in that process. It began with a baby. James E. Smith wrote, appropriately, the story of Israel's monarchy begins with an account of the early life of Samuel, the Kingmaker. God chose Samuel to anoint both Saul and David, Israel's first two kings. We'll be looking at 1 Samuel chapter 1 through chapter 3 this morning. First, there is the birth of Samuel. It was a very interesting birth. His mother-to-be, Hannah, was barren. His father had two wives. God's design from the beginning was one woman, one man, married for life. But there were times that polygamy was practiced and God tolerated it. This was the case here. The other wife of Elkanah had children. Hannah had no children. They were a righteous couple serving God. Each year they went to Shiloh, where the Ark of the Covenant was housed at that time. They went to worship and to sacrifice to the Lord. The priest at that time was Eli. He was assisted by his sons Hophni and Phinehas. They went up to worship, and Hannah was praying. Eli observed her praying, and he saw her lips moving, but he couldn't hear any sound coming forth. She was weeping, she was praying. Eli accused her of being drunk. She said, "No, I'm not drunk. I am a woman troubled in spirit. Do not regard your servant as a worthless woman. For all along, I've been speaking out of my great anxiety and vexation." Well, Eli then says, "Go in peace, and the God of Israel grant your petition that you have made to him." And she said, "Let your servant find favor in your eyes." Then the woman went her way and ate, and her face was no longer sad. It wasn't too long after that Hannah conceived. She bore a son. She called his name Samuel, for she said, "I have asked for him from the Lord." A unique feature of Samuel's birth is that Hannah promised to give him to God all the days of his life, beginning as a small child. When Samuel was weaned, which was perhaps age 2 or 3 in those days, he was taken to Shiloh and entrusted to Eli. From a very young age, he grew up in God's house, we might say, assisted Eli in whatever duties there were. He was a child prayed for, promised to the Lord, and given to the Lord. Chapter 2 has Hannah's prayer. It is a prayer of praise and thankfulness to God. Imagine, if you will, taking your son, age 3, age 4, just leaving him with someone and going home. There is a side note that tells us that Eli, the priest, had sons that were worthless. How's that for a designation? They were functioning as priests, but not functioning as they should. There were rules for which part of the sacrifice, which part of the meat of the sacrifice they got. They didn't like that. They didn't want boiled meat. They wanted raw meat so they could roast it. They wanted to pick which cuts of meat they got. They also had sexual relations with women who had come to the temple. They were immoral, wicked men. Eli apparently was a good man, but he wasn't a strong enough father with these men. He told them on occasion that they were doing wrong, but he just didn't really enforce it. Chapter 2, verse 18 says, Samuel was ministering before the Lord, a boy clothed with a linen ephod. His mother made a little robe for him each year and took it to him. After all, he was a growing boy. He needed a bigger robe each year. Eli would bless Elkanah and his wife, Hannah. He would say, May the Lord give you children by this woman for the petition she asked of the Lord. And she did have more children. Well, despite Eli's rebuke of his sons, it was not sufficient. And so the Lord rejects Eli's household. Chapter 2, verses 27 and following says that a man of God spoke to Eli. Said, basically, your service is going to end. Those who come after you will not serve. And this would come to pass. When we come to chapter 3, we have the call of Samuel. The young man Samuel was ministering to the Lord under Levi. Now Samuel had been growing up in a way pleasing to the Lord. He was serving Eli. Chapter 3, again, verse 1. And the word of the Lord was rare in those days. There was no frequent vision. We keep in mind here, Eli is a priest in Israel. He is a judge over Israel from among the last of the judges. Samuel is basically being trained to be a priest. He will become a judge, and he will then become a prophet. But here he is, a little boy, serving in the house of God. And the statement is made, the word of the Lord was rare in those days, there was no frequent vision. Some years ago, there was a lectureship speaker at one of our universities. And he closed his lecture, which I guess must have been on the Word of God and how wonderful it was. He closed by reading this verse from the King James Version, where it says, the word of the Lord was precious in those days. And he made the point, the word of God was precious in those days, and it ought to be precious to us today. Well, the problem was the speaker really hadn't done his homework. We speak of precious jewels. Why are they precious? It's because they're rare. People go to Arkansas to the crater of diamonds to hunt for diamonds. I think it was just recently someone found a pretty good sized diamond, but a lot of people go and they don't find much of anything, maybe nothing. Diamonds are valuable because they're rare. That makes them precious. On that particular occasion where the speaker made his point, I think incorrectly, one of the professors at Oklahoma Christian was the MC for that session, and he simply got up and said, Well, another translation says the word of God was rare in those days. Rare is the better translation. What does it mean? For whatever reason, there hadn't been much communication from God at that time. Perhaps it was the wickedness of the people. But it was an unusual thing for there to be a word of God. It was rare. Not very many people had visions. In fact, it was a dark time in Israel's history. Well, here's little Samuel, young Samuel. And he has no reason to think that God is speaking to him. In fact, Eli, much older and wiser, didn't realize it was God speaking either. But notice how this occurred. At that time, Eli, whose eyesight had begun to grow dim, so that he could not see, was lying down in his own place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was. Each night, a lamp was lit. It basically would burn all night until about sunrise. So this is early, wee hours of the morning. Eli and Samuel both have their places of rest within the temple in Shiloh. Verse 4, the Lord called Samuel. He said, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." But Eli said, "I didn't call you. You go back to bed." Samuel went back to bed. The Lord again called out, "Samuel." Samuel arose and went to Eli. He said, "Here I am, for you called me." Eli says, "I did not call my son. Lie down again." Verse 7 says, now Samuel did not yet know the Lord, and the word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him, serving in the house of God. But he did not know God to the extent that he would. The Lord called Samuel again the third time, and he arose and went to Eli and said, "Here I am, for you called me." Then Eli perceived that the Lord was calling the young man. So Eli said to Samuel, "Go lie down, and if he calls you, you shall say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant hears.'" So Samuel went and laid down in his place. The Lord came and stood, calling as at other times, "Samuel, Samuel." And Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant hears." And then the Lord said to Samuel, "Behold, I am about to do a thing in Israel at which the ears of everyone who hears it will tingle. On that day I will fulfill against Eli all that I have spoken concerning his house, from beginning to end. And I declare to him that I am about to punish his house forever for the iniquity that he knew, because his sons were blaspheming God, and he did not restrain them. Therefore I swear to the house of Eli that the iniquity of Eli's house shall not be atoned for by sacrifice or offering forever." God speaks to Samuel, and the word he receives is not a comforting word in regard to Eli and his house. This is going to be news that will make the ears of people in Israel tingle. Some messages affect us that way, don't they? Verse 15 says, Samuel lay until morning. He opened the doors of the house of the Lord. Must have been one of his jobs. But Samuel was afraid to tell the vision to Eli. But Eli called Samuel. "Samuel, my son." He said, "Here I am." He said, "What was it that he, that is God, told you? Do not hide it from me. May God do so to you and more also if you hide anything from me of all that he told you." So Samuel told him everything and hid nothing from him. And he said, "It is the Lord, let him do what seems good to him." Samuel's still a youngster. He's going to really begin the history of the oral prophets. And this prediction is indeed a sad, tragic one. Verse 19 says, "And Samuel grew, and the Lord was with him, and let none of his words fall to the ground. And all Israel from Dan to Beersheba knew that Samuel was established as the prophet of the Lord. And the Lord appeared again at Shiloh. For the Lord revealed himself to Samuel at Shiloh by the word of the Lord." So here is Samuel, prayed for by Hannah, given by Hannah to the service of God for all of his life. David Roper called Samuel the great Kingmaker. Samuel was indeed a great prophet. Basically, the last judge of Israel. He appointed his sons as judges, but they were wicked men. And it would be he who would have this vital role in making the first two kings of Israel. Samuel even receives brief mention in Hebrews chapter 11, the great faith chapter. John T. Willis said, "In performing his activities as judge, priest, and prophet, Samuel plays a most significant role in the transition from the period of the judges to the period of the monarchy in Israel." Samuel was the kingmaker. Next Sunday, Lord willing, we will see the request of Israel for a king. And the following Sunday, that first king is anointed.